the investor will only invest in something that is either successful or likely to become successful. Correct? So, which is where we came up with this persistent framework, and I'll just show that to you. Yeah, you can see this here, I guess. Each letter of this word, this acronym persistent, each letter of this stands for something. Okay? So let's start with P. So P stands for problem. You have to be solving a problem for somebody, otherwise, obviously, you don't have a business. Correct? E, the next one, stands for earnings model. See, you can be solving a problem for somebody, but he has to be willing to pay you, or somebody has to be willing to pay you, otherwise you don't have a business, you have a charity. Correct? And you'll be making losses all the time. Then I'll skip R for a minute. First, S is what I call size of the market. Okay. Obviously very important, because if your market size is not large, then at some stage the startup you've created will stagnate, because it'll say thak gaya, can't grow any further, market hi nahi hai, kya karu? Correct? So size of the market becomes extremely important. Then sometimes you may have a very large market size, but it's also what I call a crowded market. Just to take a very simple example, if somebody were to offer, let's say, online trading in stocks, correct, and they were to get into this business today, it's a phenomenally crowded market, because you have 5paisa.com, you got Upstocks, you got Zerodha, you got all the banks which have their own the securities division like ICICI Direct and so on. How the hell can a young startup, which obviously has less money than all these giants, how can he possibly compete with these guys? He can't, very simply, right? Therefore, if you have a market which is large but is crowded, you try and identify a subset of that market which is A, not crowded, and B, large enough. Correct? And that subset is what I call a niche, which is the N in persistent, right? And just to carry on this example, so if you are focusing on, let's say, stock trading, all these guys are basically aiming at whom? They are aiming at people who have reasonably large transaction values and volumes, correct? The young guy who, let's say, in the age group of 18 to 21, the college student, he may want to do it, but nobody gives a damn about him, because the volumes are very tiny, and the commission they will get, the brokerage they'll get is going to be equally tiny, right? So if you were to start with that segment, right, which is the college students, it is more of an open market. It is not crowded, and once you get in, you can grow. As these guys grow, they get their first job, second job, and so on. They will start contributing more and more to you. So that's what I mean. If you're in a crowded market, try and identify a niche which is not crowded and which is large. Okay? So that's the end. Then I'll come to the next S, which stands for scalability. Very, very important. The whole issue is, if you don't scale, please remember, what our Prime Minister keeps saying. मेरे क्या बोलते हैं अब 135 करोड़ देशवासी, correct? Don't for a minute think that you're the only guy who has this bright idea. No, boss. There are 135 crore, sorry, it's probably 140 crore now, people out there. And there are lots of them who will have the same idea. Many of them will have more money than you, they'll be able to grow faster. So the problem now is, you have to grow rapidly if you have to stay ahead of them, because they will anyway grow rapidly, right? And scalability is the ability to grow rapidly. Size of the market tells you how big the market is. Scalability tells you what's within this market, how fast and how much can you grow. Okay, I'll just take a couple of examples here. Let me take the example of a software company, right? Something like Infosys, but I'll take a small software company, right? Maybe 400 employees. When I say scalability, I don't mean 20%, 15%, 25% growth per year. No. Scalability in the world of startups means 200%, 300, 400% in a year. Correct? That's scalability. That's really scaling up. The problem with a company which is into software projects, is that essentially they will get projects from their clients, and what will they do? They will put their teams, which is programmers, analysts, and so on to developing these projects and ultimately implementing them. Which means if they have to quadruple in revenue, which is what I said scalability is, they've got to quadruple the manpower. So if they have 400 people today, they need 1600 people tomorrow. Can't do that. You can't take a 400 strong company into suddenly something which is 1600 strong without causing absolute chaos. And then you'll need infrastructure as well. You'll have a place to sit, and you'll have to have laptops and infrastructure, air conditioning, network, etc., right? Wi-Fi. So software project companies, they may be very good companies. I'm not saying Infosys is a bad company. It's a terrific company, but it is not a scalable business model. If you compare that with, let's say, something like Make My Trip, or you compare that with, let's say, even Zerodha, on online stock trading, or 5paisa.com, you want to scale, all you need to do spend lots more on marketing. It is not a manpower dependent or an infrastructure dependent business, right? So the point I'm trying to make is there are many factors which go into scalability, and the key factor which determines whether you're scalable or not is how much is your growth dependent on addition of proportionate manpower and infrastructure, right? So that becomes very, very important. So I've spoken about, I think, 6 of these guys. Then there is the R, which stands for risks. Obviously, every business will have risks, and one of the biggest risks of any business is the possibility of competition coming in, taking away your market share, which is why you need the second E here, which is entry barrier, right? Sometimes called a moat. See, entry barrier is what? This is your business. You have to have something in this business which prevents your competitor from entering, taking away your guys, your clients, your market share. Okay, that's an entry barrier. And by the way, if you have a patent or a complex piece of software or a product which has taken a long time to develop, that's a good entry barrier, because the other guy will take a similar quantum of time to develop that product. And incidentally, scaling, if you scale rapidly, that's another way to create an entry barrier, because you scale rapidly, you're well known, you're a brand, you're a trusted brand, and people would rather go to a trusted brand than to somebody who's just come up yesterday or 1 week back. Okay, so that's your entry barrier. And I use this term called innovation, which is the I. If you have an innovative product, if you have a patent, great. If you don't, you have to scale up rapidly. Okay? There are 2 T's left, right? These 2. The first T is team. Okay, and the team starts with founders. And there is a saying that we have in the world of startup: you have a wonderful business model, but an average team of founders won't work. But you have a average business model and a great team of founders. They'll figure out a way to pivot the model to make it work. Okay, so at an early stage, we guys as investors, and I'm not saying only investors, even the founder, if he's a great founder, your chances of the startup being successful obviously are much, much brighter. And the final point within persistent is the last T, which is, you may have wonderful scalability, great business model, earnings model, ye hai, wo hai, sab kuch hai. Boss, in very simple terms, dhanda kahan hai? That's the final proof, isn't it? Are you getting revenues? Are you getting customers? Are these customers coming back? Are they sticky customers? Are your customers increasing month on month? Are your revenues increasing month on month, right? Because ultimately, you may have everything else, but if you don't have traction and growing traction, you haven't really proved yourself, right? So that is the persistent model. Now, I must clarify a couple of things. We have now, at Lead Angels, we have been using this to figure out whether a startup is worth investing in or not. And therefore, I have 2 comments. Number 1, it is useful for the founder. It is also useful for the investor, because ultimately, both of them want the same thing, isn't it? Both of them want a successful, growing startup which gets a lot of traction, which keeps out competition, which is scalable, right? So both of them look at the persistent startup. Obviously, many people would not be using this framework. They'll be using something else, but the concepts are the same. So they may not use the term traction, they may use the term revenue growth, right? Or they may not use the term size of the market, they may use TAM, total addressable market. That's okay. But the concepts that you have in the persistent framework are, to my mind, essential to ensure that your startup has a better chance of succeeding. No guarantee. You know who lives up there? God. Even God cannot guarantee success. But at least improve your chances of success.